When you use a document scanning app to photograph a receipt from an angle, the paper first looks slanted and out of proportion. The text at the top of the receipt might look smaller because it is physically further away from your camera lens, while the bottom looks big. The app then takes that distorted perspective and snaps it into a perfectly flat top-down rectangle. The text becomes uniformly sized and the edges are perfectly parallel. The app does this by performing a mathematical operation called a homography. It calculates exactly how light would have entered your camera if you were hovering perfectly parallel above the table, and it rewrites the image to match. A homography is a geometric transformation that maps points from one plane to another while preserving straight lines. The strict requirement here is that the surface must be entirely flat. This calculation is strictly for planes like a floor, a brick wall, or a piece of paper on a desk. If you attempt to map a 3D environment or a complex object like a person's face or a coffee mug sitting on a desk, the perspective breaks down completely. The reason for this is because of something called parallax. When you move your head from side to side, objects that are close to you seem to move much faster than objects far away in the background. That depth information is incredibly complex to calculate from a single 2D photograph, but on a perfectly flat plane like a piece of paper, there is no depth variation. The surface is uniform, so we can use a straightforward geometric formula to map every single point on that surface for a new perspective. When your camera angle changes, the relative distances between points in your photograph change. This is called foreshortening. A 1-inch gap at the top of your slanted receipt takes up fewer pixels on your screen than a 1-inch gap at the bottom. A homography recalculates those distances. It pulls the corners of the slanted shape into a proper rectangle, but more importantly, it shifts every single pixel inside that shape accordingly to simulate a direct line of sight. It expands the compressed pixels at the far end of the image and shrinks the oversized pixels at the near end. It is essentially undoing the perspective distortion caused by your camera lens. A 3x3 grid of numbers called the matrix does all the work. It takes the location of every pixel in the first image, multiplies it, and spits out its exact new spot in the flattened image. Even though it is a 3x3 grid containing 9 numbers, we really only care about 8 of them. These are known as the 8 degrees of freedom. These 8 numbers control every possible way a flat image can be manipulated in 3D space. The numbers in this grid are grouped by their jobs. The 4 numbers in the top left handle spinning, resizing, and skewing. The 2 numbers on the far right shift the image up, down, left, or right. The first 2 numbers in the bottom row control the 3D perspective, which makes a flat surface look like it's tilted. To determine the specific values inside that matrix, the computer needs a reference frame. We provide this by identifying 4 distinct points on the angled image. Why exactly 4 points? This is because each point on a screen has 2 coordinates, an X position and a Y position. That means 1 point gives us 2 pieces of information. Since our matrix has 8 unknown numbers we need to solve for, we need exactly 8 pieces of information to lock down the math. 4 points times 2 coordinates gives us the exact data we need. We identify the 4 corners of the receipt in the slanted photo, and we tell the computer where those exact 4 points should sit in a perfect flat rectangle. Using those 4 matching pairs, the computer calculates the exact numbers for the 3x3 grid. Finally, it multiplies every pixel's location by that grid to instantly draw the new flat image. This concept is used in more than just scanning documents. If you have ever taken a panorama photo on your phone, you have used a homography. When you pan your phone across the landscape, you are taking dozens of separate pictures. Because your hands are rotating, each picture has a slightly different perspective. The camera software looks for distinct visual features like the corner of a building or a sharp rock that appear in both the first frame and the second frame. Once it finds matching points, it generates a homography to warp the second frame so its perspective perfectly matches the first. It then finds matches in the third frame, warps it to match the second, and chains them all together into one massive seamless image. We also see this used in live television. When you watch a football match and see the digital VAR offside line drawn perfectly across the pitch, that is a homography in action. The cameras know the exact locations of the penalty box and halfway lines on the flat field. By matching the lines on the video feed to the actual lines on the pitch, the software calculates the 3x3 grid. That grid lets them draw the digital line onto the screen so it perfectly matches the camera's angle. making it look like it's physically painted on the grass even as the camera moves. This transformation is also reversible. This is useful for stationary cameras, like a camera pointing at a football pitch. Usually, a camera takes a 3D world and flattens it into a 2D image. By using an inverse homography, we can go backwards. We map 4 points on the video feed, like the 4 corners of the penalty box, to their known physical measurements on the grass. Once that inverse matrix is locked in, you can select any pixel in the video and the mat will translate it into a real-world coordinate on the ground. This allows you to accurately measure the distance in meters between two players, track the exact sprint speed of a forward, or map a player's positioning throughout the pitch, all directly from a slanted 2D video feed. Whether it is scanning a document, stitching a mountain panorama, projecting augmented reality graphics, or measuring physical spaces from a security feed, the underlying principle remains exactly the same. Homographies give us a reliable way to manipulate and measure perspective, bridging the gap between a distorted camera lens and the flat, real-world surface.